Hello everyone, welcome to What If Bell Got Turned Into a Baby Magically movie. Before we start, please go support tenma-sama for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Bell is a male. Bell Cranel, a young level 3 adventurer who has faced great things and achieved great feats, is also well known for his terrible luck that seems to play with him. Can you imagine that because of his bad luck one day out of nowhere he is a baby? Oh, they change his gender, his race, or his age. How do you think Bell will deal with this? How will his friends and family react? How many times will it change? Not even the author knows that. Why will this happen to him? First age swap arc Baby Bell. 01. Bell Cranel, an adventurer famous for his feats despite being only level 3, had achieved great things like defeating an irregular minotaur being level 1, killing a black Goliath, facing an entire family, and defeating its level 3 captain being level 2, etc. These and more things were what had made the adventurer famous with a pathetic nickname. Unfortunately, Bell was also well known for his terrible luck, which seems to get him in and out of trouble every 5 minutes. Luckily, today he was about to give his life a complete turn. Miach Family Pharmacy. Bell was in the Miach Family Pharmacy, a somewhat small and humble-looking pharmacy that was guarded by a certain humble god and his only clerk. Naza. Here are your potions, Bell-san, giving her some blue and green potions. Bell. Gracia Naza-san, smiling, and the god Miach. Curious. Naza has been working on creating new potions, looking towards a door, wants to surpass the god insect in some aspect, so he has been working on it for days, although it doesn't seem like he'll finish soon, looking at him. Bell. Can I see it? Curious. Naza. Sure, just don't touch anything, allowing him to pass. Bell. Hi. Bell entered the small room and the first thing he noticed was a god with dark blue hair sitting at a table while shaking some test tubes. Miach. No, they're not ready yet. Frustrated. This was more complicated than I thought, sighing. Bell. Miach-sama. Looking at him. Miach-o. Bell-kun, smiling, it's a pleasure to see you, looking at him. Bell. It's a pleasure to see you, Miach-sama. What are you doing? Curious. Miach. This, showing a bright orange potion, is a changing potion. I couldn't think of anything cooler, to be honest, laughing nervously. Bell. Changing potion. Tilts his head. Miach. Yes, you see, I was planning to make potions capable of changing some physical aspect of you. Bell. Amazing. Looking at him in surprise. Miach. Yes, it can literally change any aspect of you, your appearance, your age, your gender, your race, etc., smiling proudly, although naturally it is only a prototype, for now failed, lowering his head. Bell. Huh? Why? Confused. Miach. The effect is random, it could do anything to you, looking at him, I'm working on making it give the effect that is requested instead of a random one, also I don't know exactly how long it lasts, it could last seconds, days, weeks, months, years or even be permanent. Looking at him. Bell. I see, looking at the orange potion, is there more? Miach. Right behind you, pointing at his back. Bell turned his gaze and opened his eyes in surprise when he saw a table full of potions of different colors and shades, however his face changed to white when he noticed something. Upon entering the room he left his potions that he had just bought on the table, where all the other potions were. Bell pseudo. Bell. What were mine? Sweating. Miach. I think I remember, standing next to him, let's see, it was these, grabbing 2 blue options, and these, grabbing 3 green ones, here, giving them to him. Bell. Thank you god Miach, smiling. Miach. Nothing, smiling, now go with your party, they must have been waiting for you for a while, sitting back down at his desk. Bell. Hi, see you later. Smiling. Miach. I'm not sure if the last one was one of my potions or one of the ones Bell bought, sweating. Bell, I hope you're okay and don't have any problems because of a mistake of mine, saving all the test potions. Poor Miach and poor Bell who was about to suffer again for his bad luck. Dungeon Floor 15. The Hestia Familia, made up of Bell Cranel the captain, Lilaruka Ard, the vice-captain, Welf Krazo, the blacksmith and an executive of the family, Makoto Yamato temporary member, and Harahim Sanjano members of the family, were in the dungeon on a small expedition to the 18th floor, where Lily would be in charge of selling some Welf weapons at exaggeratedly high prices. The Goliath had not been killed yet, and Lily decided that they were strong enough to defeat the Goliath with a good plan. The problem is that it was harder than they planned, and they ended up wasting several mind and healing options. Bell. That it was exhausting, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Naturally Bell was the one who had fought the most, he was the pillar of the family and the most powerful, so he was the one who had to fight Goliath head-on while receiving support. He still had some scratches, but nothing really serious, he still felt very tired. Bell looked at his bag of potions and noticed only one green bottle that he hadn't taken yet. Bell. That's great, I still have one left, taking the green potion. Mistake. A little far away were Welf and Lily collecting and inspecting weapons. Lily. Well, we don't lack anything, sighing tiredly, Lily has the Goliath stone here, taking a stone the size of her head out of her backpack. Welf. I thought it would be as big as the black Goliath, keeping the skin of the Goliath they had killed. Great, I don't know what kind of luck Bell has to get several drop items in all our expeditions, smiling. Lily. Lily thinks that Bell-sama has very strange luck. Okay, we have everything, it's time to go, putting on her backpack. Makoto Welf Harahim hi. Lily. Bell-sama. It's time to go, calling him. Everyone turned to look at Bell but. Nothing. There was literally nothing. There where Bell was supposed to be, there were only her clothes, lying on the floor without any trace of Bell. Welf Lily Harahim Makoto Bell. Sama. Sama. Dono. Immediately the three of them ran towards Bell's clothes in disbelief. Lily. Where is it? Holding her head. Harahim Bell-sama. Worried, disappeared. Welf. I don't know. Worried, how the hell did it happen? It just disappeared, looking at his clothes. Makoto. Is it possible? We were together just now, worried, could it have been a monster? Lily. I don't know, I don't think so, we would have noticed his presence immediately, but we shouldn't rule out the possibility, thoughtfully. Welf. What do we do? Looking at Lily. Makoto. Let's go find him, would be. Welf. But where? Upset, we could spend hours looking for him, and we don't even know if he's on the upper or lower floors, worried, what do we do? Lily Kuajo. Grabbing her by the shoulders. Makoto. What do we have to do, Lily Dono? Worried. Harahim Lily Sama, looking at her waiting for an answer. Lily Ami, sweating nervously. Welf Makoto Harahim what do we do? Lily. Lily doesn't know, damn it. Slapping the three of them, I don't know. Breathing heavily. Before Lily, Welf, Harahim and Makoto started arguing, something sounded. Why? The four. A baby. Confused. The three of them managed to notice how the sound came from Bell's clothes and approached with curiosity. Now in front of Bell's discarded clothes they managed to see a small lump under the clothes wriggling. Welf swallowed hard and reached for Bell's brown jacket. When I removed it, the three of them were speechless. There it was. A little baby. A little baby with red eyes and white hair. Boom. Lily fainted. Dungeon floor 18. In a small tent in the forest on the 18th floor, there were 4 people and a baby. Welf, Lily, Harahim, Makoto and Bell. Little Bell. Lily. This is ridiculous. Looking at Chiquito Bell, how the hell did it happen? Was it because of some monster? No, there isn't one with an ability like that, unless a new species knows something tells me it's something else, thoughtful. Makoto. What do we do? We can't have a baby in the dungeon, even if it's Bell Dono, it's too dangerous, looking at them. Welf. It would be best to return, serious, before something bad happens, if Hestia-sama finds out, sweating. Lily. Lily doesn't know what's worse, that she spent her time cuddling Bell or her punishment for not realizing how this happened, sighing. Makoto. Well I guess we'll find out, sighing. Harahim Bell-sama, smiling. Bell bah. Extending his hands towards Harahim. Lily. Okay, putting Bell's clothes in her backpack, we have to return to the surface, but first, Welf, can you make clothes for him? Looking at him. Welf. I can try. Fireplace Mansion Hestia family headquarters. Welf, Lily, Harahim and Makoto were in the family room kneeling with their heads down. The three of them were sweating from the intense glare they were receiving from Hestia. Hestia. How the heck did my Bell-kun turn into a baby? Looking at them intensely. The three swallowed hard. Hestia was a kind person, somewhat jealous of Bell and a bit silly in general, but she could be very scary when she was pissed off, especially with topics that included Bell's well-being. Hestia. Well. Terrifying look. Lily. And we don't know, lowering her head, Lily was collecting the drop item and the magic stone from the Goliath, and when we called him he was already a baby, sweating. Harahim. I don't think I should be so hard on them Hestia-sama. Hestia ugh, annoyed, I should give them a punishment for this, sighing, how are you doing Harahim? Looking at her. Sitting on one of the sofas was a beautiful Renard with blonde hair and green eyes, she had already changed her red kimono for her maid clothes. In her arms was a little white-haired boy sleeping peacefully in a brown jumpsuit made by Welf using Goliath skin. Harahim. Has been very calm, smiling. Hestia looked with envy at the lively Harahim who enjoyed having little Bell in her arms, Harahim's tail moved from side to side showing her excitement. Hestia. Come on, pass it to me, extending her arms with a smile. Harahim looked doubtful, but passed the little Bell to Hestia who had a big smile on her face. Hestia. Hello Bell-kun, smiling, I am your god. Ly. Waving his arms. Bell began to writhe, trying to escape from Hestia's arms. Hestia. Huh. What's happening? Looking at Harahim. Harahim. I don't know, confused. Harahim approached Hestia to give her Bell, Hestia gave it to her, and the two remained silent when they saw how Bell immediately calmed down and stopped kicking. Of course, she still had a few small tears in her eyes. NT reference image, that's Bell's appearance, it was the best image of baby Bell I found. Harahim. How beautiful, hugging Bell affectionately. Bell stopped crying and closed his eyes feeling Harahim's warmth, it wasn't long before he fell asleep. Hestia. You better go back to the dungeon and find out what turned Bell Kun into a baby, crossing her arms. Lily and we can't. Hestia ha. Lily. It was very difficult to return to the surface without Bell-sama's support, going back down would be suicide, sweating. Hestia. Wow, thoughtful, since, sighing, looking on the bright side, looking at Bell, how cute he is. Sitting next to Harahim, mini Bell, rubbing her cheek. Lily. We should talk to the guild, maybe we could receive their help, thoughtful. Welf. I'll go with Hephaestus-sama, maybe she knows something about this, thinking. Makoto. I'll go with Take Mikasuchi-sama, he and Maichi-sama had a meeting today, maybe I can ask them something about this, thoughtful. Harahim how nice, cuddling Bell. Harahim was in her own world. Hestia. Harahim, can you go and buy some things for Bell? I think she needs them, looking at her, well I'll be here taking care of Bell-kun, spreading her arms with a smile. Just like before, as soon as Bell was in Hestia's arms, he began to cry and kick in the arms of his goddess who remained silent. Then he remembered something, babies were more sensitive and perceptible than normal people, even more than adventurers, probably what made Bell cry was that he could feel her divine aura. But an aura of defeat Hestia gave it to Harahim. Hestia. Then we'll go buy her things together, sighing, and by the way, we'll order food from the fertility hostess, sighing. Harahim hi Hestia-sama, getting up. Hostess of fertility. After some shopping at the market looking for baby stuff, Hestia and Harahim were at the entrance of the fertility hostess, not knowing whether to enter or not. Hestia. Really I'm not sure if it's a good idea to go in with Bell, sweating, and if it's better if I go alone. Looking at Harahim. Before Harahim could answer, the door opened, revealing a greenish blonde-haired elf with a stoic expression. Ryu Hestia-sama. Raising an eyebrow, do you want to come in? Hestia elf, smiling nervously. Ryu looked confused at Hestia's nervous smile before looking behind her at a blonde-haired Renard, she didn't pay much attention to it until she saw out of the corner of her eye a small white-haired boy sleeping in her arms. Ryu froze out of nowhere and Hestia immediately guessed why. Ryu. A baby. Looking at the baby, it looks a lot like Cranel-san, looking sideways at Hestia, perhaps is it his son? Looking fixedly at Hestia. Hestia No, shaking her hands, it's well let's go in and do it discreetly, looking at Ryu. Ryu nodded and entered the bar followed by Hestia and Harahim. Fertility kitchen hostess. In the kitchen of the fertility hostess, all the waitresses were together looking in surprise at the little white-haired boy who was in Harahim's arms. Mamma mia. You're lucky there aren't any customers at this time of day or I'd kick you out, looking at Harahim and Hestia. Sir. That baby, looking at the baby, eyes at Bell-sans. Trembling. They all looked at Hestia waiting for an answer. Hestia. Nervous, no, it's not Bell-kun's, sighing, rather he is Bell-kun. Silence. They all remained in complete silence listening to Hestia's words. Even my mom couldn't help but open her eyes slightly in surprise. Ryu. Is that Cranel-san? Looking at Bell. Sir H how did it happen? Looking at Hestia. Hestia. I'll tell you what we know so far. Twilight Mansion headquarters of the Loki family. In the dining room of the mansion was a golden-haired swordswoman eating quietly next to an elf with golden blonde hair, two Amazons, and a high elf with jade hair. Lefia. What are you planning to do today, Aiz-san? Looking at her curiously. Aiz thoughtful, I'll go to the dungeon, eating again. Fiona. We'll go with you. Smiling. Hein. Sure, we have nothing better to do, shrugging. Lefia. Two would like to go too, nervous. Aiz looked at everyone and nodded, she saw no problem with them accompanying her. Rivera. I'll go too, relax. They all looked at Riveria in surprise. It wasn't normal for her to go to the dungeon with them. Normally, it was because she didn't have much free time and had to make sure Loki didn't do anything stupid. Riveria. Today Finn will take care of Loki and I don't have much paperwork so I can finish it quickly once we get back, looking at them, so I'll go too. They all nodded at Riveria's words and finished eating to go to the dungeon. Aiz was the most impatient because she wanted to go quickly. Once they finished eating, they gathered their things and went on their way to the dungeon. By chance they passed near a well-known place that Loki frequented a lot. Leave Bell-kun alone. They all turned and looked closely at the door of the premises, even though it was closed they could clearly hear the shouts of fighting coming from inside. Come on. Just let me carry it. Naya. No. I know you, you perverted cat, I won't let you carry him. Hey. He's too young Naya, even I have limits you know. I don't believe you at all. They all looked at each other doubtfully, they were going to ignore what they heard and continue their way to the dungeon if it weren't for why Aiz started walking towards the bar without saying anything. Lefia Aiz-san. Looking at her. Aiz. I'll go see what's going on, entering the bar. They all looked at each other and decided to follow Aiz. Upon entering the bar they froze when they saw some of the waitresses along with Renard and Hestia in a circle, kicking a black-haired cat beast man. Chloe. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it Naya. Apologizing. While this was happening they were watched from afar by Ryu who also wanted to kick Chloe but couldn't, reason. Help extending his little hands. Ryu looked at the little white-haired boy in his arms, without knowing it a small smile appeared on his lips. Hey. He looks a lot like Argonaut-kun. Ryu opened her eyes in surprise and with a quick movement she moved away from an imperactive Amazon who had taken her by surprise. Fiona. Oh you are fast Elf-san, smiling. It was at that moment that they all realized the presence of the Loki family and stopped kicking Chloe. Hestia. Looking at the others, gee. Aiz was about to ask something until her eyes caught a white hair. When his eyes looked at the baby in Ryu's arms he stood completely still. Hestia and I don't know what, squinting, what are you doing here? Riveria. We were going to go to the dungeon, but Aiz heard the fight and wanted to see what was happening, sighing, looking at Bell, curious is that baby Bell Cranel's son. Curious. Hestia. Ugh what do I do? If Loki finds out, I won't be able to live with his teasing, sweating. Oh wait. I have an idea and I can make Wall and I don't know what believe that, evil smile. That's right. He's Bell-kun's son, crossing his arms. Everyone, both the waitresses and the members of the Loki family, fell silent upon hearing Hestia's words. Boom. Sir fainted and fell to the floor. Ryu. But you said. Ryu fell silent when Hestia winked at him with pleading eyes. Riveria. I see and who is the mother? Raising an eyebrow. Hestia. Of course it is, being silent. Hestia began to sweat. What was she saying now? Who could possibly play the mother? As much as she liked to say that she was the mother, it was impossible. A god who had come down to the earthly world could never have children, so she had no choice but to tell the truth. Hestia. He is not Bell-kun's son, depressed, he is its Bell-kun, looking at them defeated. Neither of them could help but look at Hestia in surprise before looking at the baby, it was a miniature copy of Bell, why was it Bell? Knowing this, Riveria noticed how Aiz seemed to calm down. Aiz approached Bell, ignoring Ryu's suspicious look. Aiz bunny, extending his finger. Bell woke up from his undisturbed sleep and looked at a sleepy Aiz, realizing who it was his eyes opened wide and looked at Aiz with brightness. Bell. There you go. Extending her little hands. Aiz reached out to pick him up, but before she could even touch him, Ryu stepped back with a distrustful look. Aiz. Give it to me, expressionless. Ryu unsheathed a hidden knife and pointed it at Aiz. Ryu. You are not from his family and you do not have permission from anyone in his family to carry him, it would be. Aiz sharpened her gaze and placed her hand on the hilt of her sword, ready to unsheath it. Seeing the situation, Riveria took Aiz by the shoulder and shook her head. Aiz returned to her expressionless face as she released the hilt of her sword, but she still looked annoyed. Ryu also put away his weapon and walked with the other waitresses. Hestia. Don't tell Loki anything about this, it would be. Riveria. Okay, calm. Hestia. Really? Surprised, I thought it would be more diffy. Riveria. In exchange, I want you to let Aiz carry it, staring at her. Hestia. I spoke too soon, sighing. Ryu looked expectantly at Hestia waiting for her answer. Hestia. Okay, sighing, I prefer that she carry him than Loki knowing about this, looking at Ryu, let her carry Bell. Ryu looked at Aiz doubtfully, but approached her and handed it to her very carefully. Aiz's eyes seemed to shine, and she took Bell carefully, she didn't know how to carry babies, so she did her best to imitate the way Ryu did it. Bell Aiz. Smiling. Hestia was shocked again, it was the first time since she transformed into a baby that she said a word that was good, the bad thing was that it was the name of the woman she hated. Aiz smiled slightly and hugged the baby. Aiz. Yes that's my name, smiling slightly. Riveria and Tiona also smiled when they saw Aiz acting in such a way, she looked like a mother. Ian started fantasizing about a mini Finn, and Lefia was dying of jealousy. Hestia sighed knowing that the people she least wanted to know about this already knew. These would certainly be troublesome days for the Hestia family. End. First arc age change the little rabbit, 02. Hostess of Fertility. In the Fertility hostess you could see all the girls sitting in front of some tables or in front of the bar eating tensely. My mom had said, if you are going to talk here you will have to order food. And they had to ask for food. Everyone except Lefia and whoever had gone to the dungeon with the excuse that she had to raise money, obviously she didn't even want to see baby Bell. Quite the opposite of Harahim, who was the only one who hadn't touched her food since she was more busy carrying a small baby rabbit which was sleeping peacefully in her arms. Aiz was sitting at the bar next to Riveria. She was staring at Harahim without showing any emotion. She wanted to continue carrying little Bell, but Riveria told her that it was better to leave him to Harahim, who had said that she had taken care of her younger siblings in the past, so she was the one who had more experience in the matter. Aiz couldn't deny that she felt betrayed, but she had to give the baby to Harahim and watch from afar. At least he felt a little happy. He didn't know why nor could he describe it, but he felt happy. Aiz smiled slightly and continued eating a plate full of Jag American. Mamma Mia had seen for some time her great taste for Jag American and decided to include it in the menu, of course at an exaggerated price. A Jag American should not cost more than 100 valis, but Mamma Mia's cost 1,000. Riveria had told her it was better to buy them elsewhere, but Aiz said they were worth it. Apparently they were the most delicious she had ever eaten in her life. My mom could be greedy with money, but she took care of giving you quality food. Riveria sighed at the large amount of Jag American on Aiz's plate. She still thought it was a scam, but let it go, just because Aiz was happy. Of course she knew the reason. Aiz had been somehow happier since baby Bell had called her by her name. According to the goddess Hestia, he hadn't said a word until now since his transformation, so it was surprising that the first word he said was Aiz's name. Fiona. Back. Riveria and Aiz stopped eating to see a cheerful Amazon sit next to Aiz and put an arm around her neck. Fiona. How does it feel to have you as the first word in Argonaut, Chiquito? Smiling happily. Aiz, it's okay I guess. Fiona. I saw you smile. Smiling, I know, how about we ask for little Argonaut and you take care of him? Smiling. Aiz's eyes shone considering the idea. Just as she was about to go and ask Hestia to give her Bell, she was stopped by Riveria. Riveria. Definitely not, deadpan. Fiona and Aiz were shocked upon hearing Riveria's words. Aiz already had his hand on the hilt of his sword for anything until Riveria explained her reasons to him. Riveria. You don't know anything about taking care of babies, you don't know what they eat or how to take care of themselves, much less do we have the materials to take care of a baby, not to mention Loki. Aiz was slightly exalted upon hearing the mention of Loki. She knew of his apparent hatred towards the Hestia family and began to fear that Loki would try something against the baby Bell. While Aiz was thinking, Riveria was looking out of the corner of her eye at Bell, who was playing with a wooden spoon. Harahim still had him in her arms, but she was distracted listening to an argument between Hestia and Ryu. Bell gripped the spoon tightly. He was a baby, so it's a trick all babies have. Harahim didn't notice, but Riveria could perfectly see how the spoon was shattered from the part where Bell pressed it, as if it were simple plasticine. Riveria opened her eyes slightly, quickly making a hypothesis as to why that happened. Having a rough idea, she stood up and walked towards Hestia, who quickly noticed her. Hestia. What's going on? Looking at her. Riveria. Well, we'll leave for now, but if you need it, we'll be more than willing to help you take care of Bell, should you need it upper levels, speaking calmly. Hestia narrowed her eyes as she saw a dangerous glint in Riveria's eyes, knowing she was planning something. Riveria. It's time to go, looking at Aiz. Aiz was going to complain, but seeing Riveria's expressionless face she stopped and nodded slowly. Tyan, who was there, stood up calmly and walked beside them. Fiona. So fast, I haven't even finished eating, excited. Riveria. It's time to go, pulling it. Tyan. Hey. Wait. Oh my. Put it to go. The door of the premises closed. Hestia frowned, knowing that Riveria's words had a hidden meaning, but she put it aside and focused again on her discussion with Ryu, who had told her that Sir could take care of the little Bell. Of course she disagreed because knowing Sir, she probably tried to make her say her name or be her favorite, and she couldn't allow that, not to mention that she didn't trust a black-haired cat. Nobody trusted Chloe to take care of a baby. And so the afternoon passed, with a lot of discussions about baby Bell and a lot of criticism towards Chloe. Twilight Mansion. They had all returned to the Twilight Mansion by Riveria's orders. They thought that she would tell them something important or a plan to be able to take care of baby Bell, but she simply pulled Aiz towards the library and left them there. Tyan. I'll go back to spy on the captain, leaving. Fiona. Well, I guess I'll go for a walk, leaving. Library. In the library, Aiz stood in the middle of the room, trembling. Bad memories of Riveria's strict lessons came to her like old wounds. Riveria had made sure she received a good education and had taken the time to educate her strictly. She had to learn the hard way or. Aiz trembled as she remembered those hellish swimming exercises that seemed anything but swimming exercises as Riveria tied her to an adamantine rope and threw her into the water. Ham. Aiz became excited and looked at Riveria who had left a pile of books on a table in front of her. Riveria. Well, I'm sure the goddess Hestia will come tomorrow looking for our help. Until then, opening one of the books, I never taught you about baby care because I thought you were too young, but now that's changed, you're 16, and I now have an excuse to cough to teach you about motherhood, coughing a little, now. We will regret it. Aye. From the depths of Aiz, a mini Aiz screamed in terror upon hearing some very familiar words. Mansion fireplace. After finishing eating at the hostess of the Fertility and saying goodbye to the girls, they had returned to the fireplace mansion, hoping to meet the others. They were a little surprised to see no one, so they assumed they were still looking for answers with the gods Hephaestus, Takemikasuchi and Maich. Hestia. Well, there are many unused rooms in the mansion, so we can use one to put a crib and baby things for Bell, thoughtful. Harahim, eh? But we don't have a crib, looking at her. Hestia. We have a problem, sighing, the good thing is that we already solved the food issue, Bell is old enough to eat porridge, it was lucky that my mom said I could prepare it, turning her head away. Harahim. You have to thank Ryu-san and Sir-san for convincing my mom to lower the price of the porridge, smiling. Hestia. Crossing her arms. Clack. They both turned their gaze towards the door and saw Welf who was carrying several bags with wooden materials and some metal. Welf. Ah. They're here, walking towards them. Hestia. Welcome Welf-kun, what is that? Curious. Welf. I told Hephaestus-sama about the situation and he said he knew absolutely nothing, yet he told me that a baby would need a crib and gave me these materials to make it, showing the bags. Hestia. Perfect. I'll thank Hephaestus later at work, smiling. Elba. 2. Looking at the well. Welf. It still feels strange to me to see Bell as a baby, thoughtful, hey, he's okay, right? Nervous. Harahim. Why do you say that? Inspecting Bell, I see it as normal, confused. Welf. Yes, but I'm referring to the jumpsuit, sweating, it's made of Goliath skin, it's a bit heavy, not as much as the black Goliath skin, but it's still heavy. I thought they would change it or buy another one, looking at them. Hestia and Harahim opened their eyes as they realized that. Harahim mentally scolded herself because she was carrying Bell the whole time so she should have noticed that, but she was an adventurer, she had a fauna, and she was used to wearing the black Goliath fur cloak, so she barely felt the weight of the Goliath fur honestly, however a baby would surely feel it. Harahim looked worriedly at Bell looking for any sign of tiredness or discomfort, she observed him for a few seconds, until Bell put a hand on her nose and began to laugh at her excited face. Hestia. Now that I think about it, thoughtful, Harahim, take off her jumpsuit, it would be. Harahim nodded slowly and removed Bell's jumpsuit revealing her small body, the three of them looked at her back and opened their eyes in shock at seeing her skirt. Hestia. I thought I lost him when he transformed into a baby, opening her eyes. Hestia read Bell's fauna more closely and her surprise increased when she saw that it also retained its level 3 stats. We will be more than willing to help you with Bell's care should you need at higher levels. Hestia, that's what she meant, squinting her eyes, We don't need anyone's help, we can take care of Bell-kun, crossing her arms. Hestia looked at everyone determined, Bell was a member of her family and technically her captain, it was her responsibility to take care of him, they would never let anyone else take care of him. Lily. What the hell happened here? Lily and Mikoto had already arrived at the fireplace mansion after a little search for answers. Lily had returned defeated as she found no information in the guild and that was shameful according to her. Unlike Mikoto, who returned happy because when she told the god Maich about the situation, he explained what possibly happened and that they shouldn't worry because he was working on a potion that counteracts the effect of the multi-jug changing potion. They had sought out Hestia to give her the news, but they hadn't expected to encounter such a scene. The destroyed kitchen. The wooden table was smashed to pieces, all the pieces were collected in a pile of debris on fire. There was mush spread all over the walls and ceiling. The sink was broken and water was dripping everywhere. And the whole kitchen floor was full of water. The others. So, Hestia, Welf and Harahim were lying unconscious on the wet ground, defeated. On top of Harahim's back was Yukito Bell sitting, using Harahim as a float to avoid getting wet. Elba. Looking at Lily and Mikoto. Both. Meeting room. After getting away from the war zone, rescuing Hestia, Welf and Harahim, Lily and Mikoto led the three to the meeting room where there was a sturdy wooden table and some armchairs around it where everyone could sit. Lily was checking the wounded while Mikoto was carrying the baby rabbit. Mikoto. Good. Now I'll take care of him, Bell Dono, smiling. Lily. So much trouble just taking care of a baby. Are they idiots? looking at a newly awakened Hestia. Hestia, ugh, my head, sucking her head. Hestia looked at Lily in bewilderment and tried to remember what happened. The last thing she remembered was Bell slamming his hand on the wooden table, destroying it completely. Pieces flew out and one of them hit her on the head. Hestia. What happened? Sitting down. Lily. That's what Lily is asking herself. Ugh. Lily and Hestia watched Welf, who had also begun to awaken. Welf. What happened? Hestia. Welf-kun, are you okay? Looking at him. Welf. Yeah, I am. Lilicuajo, rubbing his head. Hestia. Huh. Lily. Hey, idiot blacksmith, how many fingers do you see? Raising 3 fingers. Welf. What a baby. Looking at her. Lily, ugh, it's worse than Lily imagined, sighing. Hestia. Just let them rest, they had a bad time apparently, seeing Welf half-idiot and Harahim asleep. It had been 2 hours and finally all 3 had fully recovered. Welf stood in a corner with a blank stare, humiliated by a baby. Harahim was sitting on the floor with her head down, disappointed in herself. Hestia. What happened after I fainted? Looking at Harahim. Harahim. Well. While Harahim was telling Hestia what had happened in the distance, Makoto was quietly feeding baby Bell. Makoto coma Bell dono. Excitedly. Bell. Bell slowly ate the porridge, completely distrusting Makoto, but he was hungry, so he had no choice but to accept the porridge. Returning to Hestia and Harahim. Harahim had already finished telling Hestia what had happened, and Hestia was silently processing the information. According to what they told him, after she fainted, Welf began to gather the pieces of the wooden table and pile them up to throw them away later. Harahim took out the porridge and tried to feed it to Bell, but for some reason, no matter how much his stomach growled, Bell wouldn't accept the porridge. He seemed upset about something, according to Harahim. Harahim tried the "here comes the little bird" trick, but it was useless, and Bell slapped the spoon away without controlling his strength. The spoon flew towards a shelf attached to the wall where all the jars with baby food for Bell were. The spoon hit all the jars with tremendous force and destroyed them, scattering baby food everywhere. Somehow defying physics, the spoon felt really bad, and it also bounced towards the kitchen faucet and hit it, destroying it. The faucet broke into pieces and quickly lots and lots of water started to gush out, soaking the floor and making a giant puddle. Welf tried to stop the water leak and for some strange reason mentioned Bell's magic. Baby Bell heard him and tried to say the word happy because it sounded familiar to her. Surprisingly, I managed to say the name of his magic, and since it is a magic without singing, I cast it. A beam of fire shot towards the pile of rubble, setting it ablaze and sending debris flying into the air. Debris hit Welf in the head and like her it knocked him out. Harahim didn't know what to do, the first thing that came to mind was to get baby Bell out of there and then return by Welf. But in doing so, he slipped on the water. And that's the last thing Harahim remembers. Hestia. How the hell did a baby defeat us with a table and a spoon, covering his face, ugh. Harahim and Welf looked away ashamed of themselves. They were literally adventurers who faced death day after day as something every day, facing monsters stronger than them, and a baby defeated them with 2 slaps that didn't even hit them. Welf. I will go make a cradle for him, leaving defeated. And there went the fragmented hammer. Harahim, she's already eating, empty smile. Harahim watched with a blank stare as Makoto calmly fed Bell, who seemed happy with the delicious porridge. Bell. Clapping. Makoto. Don't worry, Bell dono. There's more. Giving her another spoonful. Bell clapped happily again and gladly accepted the spoonful of porridge, ignoring the looks from Harahim, Hestia and Lily, along with Makoto. Hestia, and we can take care of him. Hestia no longer sounded so convinced. Twilight Mansion. Walking through the halls of the Twilight Mansion was a half-tsundere elf named Lefia. She was upset because, according to her, because of a certain white-haired human, Aiz had again cancelled an outing with her to go see him. Lefia had thought that this had been a master plan by Bell to get Aiz's attention again, to transform into a baby, after all who wouldn't want to take care of a cute baby. Even Aiz would want to, in fact she herself had to admit that baby Bell looked cute, but even so, she wouldn't let herself be overshadowed by his appearance. I knew that behind all that tenderness there was an evil being monopolizing Aiz's attention. Lefia. That stupid human, using his dirty tricks to get Aiz's attention, pouting, even transformed into a cute baby whom. I won't let him fool me, shaking her head. I'll go to the library and look for some clue to find out how his age changed, maybe if I do that. Lefia's imagination home. The scientist Lefia was moving some test bottles until after a few mixes a green potion came out and she drank it. As if by magic, Lefia transformed into a baby and crawled over to Aiz, who was cuddling a little white-haired baby until he saw her. Aiz, oh. Looking at baby Lefia, it's Lefia. Aiz left Bell aside and went to carry Lefia. Aiz. It's baby Lefia. Surprised, "You're very pretty," smiling, much more so than that white-haired baby, snorting. Lefia smiled proudly, happy to hear those words. Aiz hugged her affectionately and Lefia gladly accepted the pleasure, then she looked at a small baby Bell and smiled mockingly. At least it was the case until baby Bell started sniffling and her eyes watered up in a comical way. Lefia was shocked and came out of her imagination. End of Lefia's imagination. Lefia opened her eyes abruptly and felt a lurch in her stomach, she felt sick. Lefia. No. Shaking her head, "I mustn't let it make me feel bad, I must follow my plan, determined." Lefia walked determinedly towards the library, thinking about carrying out her magnificent plan. If a nobody like Bell could make a potion that turns you back into a baby, she could do it too. I never expected to see the scene of Aiz falling to the ground completely defeated and bruised. Lefia blinking in shock. Riveria. "I told you before and I'll say it again, you won't leave here until we finish your studies," expressive look. Aiz on the ground began to tremble, praying to the gods that something would happen to get her out of this situation. Aiz slowly looked up and looked at her with surprise at seeing her there, quickly his look changed to one of hope waiting for her to do something. Unfortunately Riveria was faster. Riveria turning to see Lefia. Lefia bridled at Riveria's piercing gaze and took a step back. Riveria. "Didn't you see the sign I put on the door saying study section in progress?" Sharpening her gaze. Lefia and no, yo, assistada. Lefia began to tremble when she heard Riveria's strong and firm footsteps as she slowly approached her. In Lefia's mind she was seeing a Riverianosaurus Rex spitting fire and approaching terrifyingly towards her, who was nothing more than an insignificant flea next to her. Lefia was pushed out of the library and stared blankly and soullessly as Riveria slammed the door shut right in front of her. The colorless Lefia stood there for a few seconds before robotically turning her body towards the direction of the certain girls and walked off towards her room. Today had been a strange day for her. Library. What are you doing on the floor? Get up, we have much more to learn and you only have one day to learn it all. Aiz slowly got up and looked at the window, devising a plan to escape. At this point, she didn't care if she went out destroying the place. But before doing so she was grabbed by the shoulder and stopped by Riveria. Riveria. "Oh no, taking out an adamantine rope, you only have a few hours to learn all this, you can't escape or you'll waste too much time," squinting, "Now what were we talking about?" "Yeah, Motherhood lesson 6 of 50. Aye. This time it was the big girl who shouted. End. First age swap Arkham Mother More. 03. Mansion fireplace. It was 11 at night and everything had gone normally. Harahim had changed Bell's diaper and left him in his newly built crib to sleep. She lay down on a futon that Makoto lent her and put next to Bell's crib so she could watch him and take care of him. Everyone had gone to sleep trusting Harahim to take care of Bell. Yep, they had basically left the responsibility to her. And with that in mind, everyone slept peacefully. Less beautiful. Harahim had gotten up upon hearing his crying and picked him up to rock him to sleep. That worked and he put him back in his crib, but as he was about to go to bed, Bell started crying again. That happened 2 other times, it seemed like Bell was complaining about something or something. Harahim didn't know what to do anymore. She had offered him the porridge in case he was hungry, and judging by the sound Bell's stomach was making, he was probably hungry, but he wouldn't accept it. She tried the "here comes the little bird" trick again, but it was useless. At least this time he didn't smack the spoon. Harahim began to despair, worried that she was doing something wrong, until she was brought out of her thoughts when she felt a small tug on her kimono. Looking down, he saw Bell, who was making an adorable pout. The memory came to Harahim's head, she remembered a time when her mother was carrying one of her brothers who started pulling her kimono. She had said she was hungry and started breastfeeding him. Harahim's face began to turn completely red and she shook her head in sadness, trying to think of another reason why Bell didn't want to sleep. But no matter how hard he tried to find another reason, he couldn't find one. Bell began to writhe in his arms, expressing disgust as he babbled. "Harahim. I can't give you milk," blushing, "please stop crying, tomorrow we can go shopping," smiling. Harahim's soft words didn't work and Bell started kicking. Harahim began to sweat, feeling difficulty in carrying Bell. He was stronger than her and being a baby she didn't control her strength in the slightest, so she had to be careful or she could end up in a bad way. Harahim. Look. Showing a rattle. Welf had made some simple wooden toys in cases like this in the hope that they might calm Bell. Of course, simple wooden toys would not satisfy their hunger. Harahim was excited when she saw Bell kick the toy which instantly broke, fortunately it didn't hit her, but it did make a little noise, just a little. Harahim became more desperate, she didn't want anyone to wake up because of her and she didn't want Bell to be upset either. She took a deep breath and, taking a lot of courage, slowly lowered her red kimono, revealing her breasts. It wasn't unusual to wear a kimono without underwear, especially if you were someone who wore it daily. Harahim slowly brought Bell towards one of her breasts which he instinctively began to suck. Harahim looked up and sighed, exhausted from this whole situation. At least Bell had calmed down. Harahim. Please don't remember any of this, Bell-sama, embarrassed. Harahim looked at Bell hoping he wouldn't be upset that her breasts weren't producing milk. Surprisingly he looked very calm and continued sucking quietly. Leaving aside the whole embarrassing situation, Harahim smiled. She felt like a real mother, she liked the feeling of having a baby and taking care of it. She sat down on a chair in the room and let Bell continue with his work. After a few minutes Bell finally stopped sucking and let out a small burp that surprised Harahim, because she shouldn't burp if she hadn't eaten anything. I look at her chest and couldn't help but open my eyes in surprise when I see a little milk coming out of her nipple. Was breastfeeding. Harahim. EA. Standing up. Harahim got up from the chair in surprise, not knowing the reason why she was breastfeeding. She never imagined that was possible. Bell bah. Tilts his head. Harahim looked at Bell and smiled tiredly. She was no longer going to look for reasons, she would simply continue taking care of Bell. Just like she had seen her mother do before, she put Bell on her shoulder and started patting him lightly and gently on his back to make him burp. After listening to some of Bell's adults, Harahim stopped patting him and started rocking him gently. Bell. Breathing. Bell looked at Harahim one last time before sleeping and let out a small, adorable laugh. Harahim opened her eyes and smiled with joy. No matter how much time passed or even if Bell returned to normal, she would remember this beautiful moment forever and treasure it with great affection, like the day she felt the love of having a child. Mansion room. What are you talking about? In the mansion's fireplace room, everyone was gathered, watching with surprise and shame as Harahim was carrying baby Bell in her arms. She was hiding her blushing face from the shame of revealing what she had done last night. Hestia was the most surprised because according to Harahim she had breastfed and nursed Bell at night. Hestia sighed tiredly, really strange and weird things happened to this family. Hestia. You know, I'm not going to try to find answers anymore. I feel like I'm getting more and more lost, placing her hand on her face, just keep taking care of Bell, sighing. Harahim nodded quickly, happy to spend time with baby Bell. Mansion kitchen. It was already 9 in the morning and it was time to eat. Unfortunately yesterday the kitchen had been almost destroyed and there was nothing to prepare food. They had thought about going to the Fertility hostess but hadn't been to the dungeon lately, so considering how expensive Mamma Mia's food was, it was better to save some money. Hestia. Okay, Harahim and Lily will go to the market to buy everything we need for dinner, support me, make sure you get good prices and good food, looking at her. Lily calmly raised a thumb, it was normal that she would take charge of extorting to obtain better prices. Hestia. Well, Mikoto and I will stay to take care of Bell, smiling. Everyone looked at Hestia wondering if she had lost a screw. Hestia. What's going on? Nervous. Well, are you sure? I remind you that the kitchen is destroyed because you think we can take care of it, sweating. Hestia. We have no choice, we can only hope that Bell-kun doesn't throw a tantrum. Everyone looked at Bell who looked back at them innocently. Well, so small and dangerous. Lily. Goliath's skin doesn't help much, at least it keeps him safe, sighing, well let's go, give the baby to Mikoto, looking at Harahim. Harahim. But, hugging Bell. Lily raised an eyebrow as she looked at Harahim as if to say. It wasn't a question. Harahim sighed and walked defeated towards Mikoto to give her Bell. Bell looked at this confused, when he saw Harahim leave him in Mikoto's arms he began to cry, while extending his little hands towards Harahim. Harahim's heart broke and she quickly tried to take Bell back, but Lily pulled her out of the mansion against her will. Harahim Bell. Extending her hand. Pam. The door closed. Everyone got nervous, they quickly tried to calm Bell down, knowing how dangerous he is when he is not controlled. Mikoto. Look, Bell Dono. Pointing at the window. Everyone turned to look at the window and watched a white rabbit hop across the yard. Hestia. First of all, what's a rabbit doing in our headquarters? And secondly, really? You couldn't have come up with something better. Hestia remained silent when she saw Bell watching the rabbit with shining eyes, she had already stopped crying. Then he watched with a drop of an eye at Mikoto, who was just as amazed as baby Bell when she saw the rabbit calmly jump through the grass. Belle ba. Pointing at the bunny. Mikoto. Do you want to play with him? Of course, Bell Dono, smiling. Mikoto calmly walked out into the yard and watched the little rabbit who quickly noticed her presence. Harahim approached the rabbit a few steps, which slowly backed away with distrust. Mikoto watched this and put a hand on her chin before looking at Bell. Mikoto. Can Bell Dono crawl? Bell. From. Mikoto. Perfect. Mikoto gently placed Bell on the grass, it was short so there shouldn't be any problems or anything. Bell looked around in wonder, then looked at the rabbit with shining eyes and tried to approach it. But it was useless, he had always been carried by someone so he didn't know how to walk or crawl. But that's what Makoto was for. Makoto Bell don't know. Bell looked at Makoto who was sitting on the grass next to him. Makoto. You just have to crawl like this. Makoto began to crawl slowly showing Bell how to do it. Bell looked at his little hands and then at Makoto. It wasn't long before she put both hands on the grass to imitate Makoto. Bell laughed as she felt the grass tickle her hands and quickly began to crawl just like Makoto was doing. Makoto. Perfect, Bell Dono. You're doing it very well. Smiling. Bell smiled proudly at himself and then looked at the rabbit which was standing on two legs looking at Makoto with distrust. Bell. Ah. Crawling. The rabbit stopped looking at Makoto to turn to look at him and tilted his head in an adorable way. The rabbit got back on all fours and walked slowly towards him with caution. Finally both were just a few centimeters away. Bell watched him with a sparkle in his eyes and the rabbit brought his nose closer and began to sniff him. Suddenly the rabbit's tail began to wag and he approached Bell, rubbing his cheek against his in a loving manner. Bell had a new friend. Makoto smiled watching this, she was definitely good at taking care of babies. Fireplace mansion room. Harahim and Welf were silently watching baby Bell and the little rabbit play. They were worried that Bell wouldn't be able to control himself and accidentally hit the rabbit and well, you know. But surprisingly it wasn't like that, Bell had already accidentally hit the rabbit more than once and the rabbit hadn't flown away, Bell was controlling himself. Welf. Don't buck with me, you treat that rabbit with delicacy and you used us like a boxing glove, sighing. Hestia. See the bright side, she now has a friend to play with, smiling. Makoto friend, Mirandolos. Welf Hestia eh? Looking at her. Makoto. She's female, looking at the rabbit. Hestia. Oh, I see, it needs a name, what should we call it? Thoughtful. Makoto. Let's let Bell Dono decide, looking at Bell. Welf. Huh. What? Curious. Makoto sat on the floor next to Bell and her rabbit and began to say some names. Makoto Yui, looking at him. Bell. Tilts his head. Makoto. Aiko, Akina, Kid, Mai, Numi, Yasagi, Yumiko, Ryan, Sayumi, Yuki. Bello. Ah. Bah. Raising his arms. Bell raised his arms in excitement, the rabbit somehow seemed to understand his excitement and jumped in circles around Bell. Makoto. Then her name will be Yuki. Smiling. Yuki. I'm back motherfuckers, triumphant. Bell and the now named Yuki continued playing happily, however. Bell started clapping as he watched Yuki jump from side to side, but accidentally one of his claps was too loud. Hestia, Welf and Makoto were excited when they heard a very loud applause and felt a current of wind blowing. Both of them watched Bell who looked around curiously at the draft. Then he looked at Yuki who was a few meters away from him, observing the place in perplexity. Yuki didn't know that it was Bell who made the draft, so she quickly approached him and looked around cautiously looking for the person responsible, not knowing that the person responsible was behind her. Hestia. Well, I see that she can also use her level 3 strength when she gets excited, sighing, in that case we must be careful or she can hurt Yuki, and that would make everything worse, sighing tiredly. Hestia looked at a wall where there was a rack for decorative weapons, without an edge, there was only one weapon that had an edge, and at the same time no. Hestia observed the Hestia knife, Bell's black knife that she always used, now she didn't have it because it would be dangerous. Hestia looked more closely at the blade, specifically the letters on it. Hestia opened her eyes, if she could give her Felnet to a lifeless object she could give it to a living being, it didn't matter if it wasn't human. Hestia. I have an idea. Fireplace mansion entrance. Harahim and Lily were already back at the mansion. It had only been 30 minutes since they left, Harahim wanted to return quickly to take care of baby Bell, unfortunately for Lily she was dragged almost the entire way by Harahim, who wanted to return as soon as possible, at least she didn't have to walk. Harahim. We're back. Slamming the door. Harahim walked quickly through the corridors towards the mansion's living room, being followed by Lily, who believed that Harahim was exaggerating. Upon arriving at the room, they opened the door and were perplexed to see the room completely in disarray and with some things destroyed. Hestia was right in front of them, lying on the ground unconscious, she had a red mark on her face, the mark was like a kick from rabbit. They saw one of the armchairs in which Welf was lying, passed out, he had a red cheek with the mark of a baby's hand. Makoto wasn't there. They both looked at the placemat and watched baby Bell happily play with a white rabbit. However, the rabbit was unusual, it was a little faster and its jumps were very high, it almost looked like a little Almira. Harahim quickly approached Bell and picked him up. Harahim Bell. Hugging him. Bell blinked in puzzlement before starting to laugh. Bell tried to hug Harahim, but her arms were too small, so he just made an adorable attempt at hugging her. Harahim smiled fondly and kissed Bell's forehead, she had been worried. Lily. Harahim. Harahim. Yes. Smiling. Lily. Lily found Mikoto. Lily was standing in front of a broken window that overlooked the courtyard. Just on the other side of the window was Mikoto lying unconscious in a bush. In her hand she had a paper. Lily took the paper and read it. Lily. This is. Status Yuki. Level 1. Race Rabbit. Family Hestia. Statistics. Strength 0000I. Resistance 0000I. Dexterity 0000I. Agility 0000I. Magic 0000I. Total 0000. Universal Power 0000. Magic. Skills. Acquired skills. Lily. Yuki. Who the hell is Yuki? Turning around to look at the place. Breed. Rabbit. Lily narrowed her eyes and looked at the mat where there was a white rabbit watching Harahim with intrigue. Belled ah. Pointing at Yuki. Harahim looked down and observed the little rabbit. Yuki Caillou. Tilts his head. Bell. Ah. Ah. Pointing at the rabbit. Harahim looked at Bell and smiled, as if she understood what he wanted. Harahim carried the rabbit too and sat on a sofa. She left Bell and the rabbit next to her while she watched them. Bell bah. Hugging the rabbit. The rabbit began to purr and pressed his cheek against Bell's in a form of affection. Attention. Useless data. Rabbits, like cats, purr. They do it when they want to show that they are happy or calm. Thank you for your attention. Harahim smiled as she saw Bell and the rabbit living together. On the other armchair were Hestia and Lily on the armchair where Welf was still unconscious. Splash. Hestia exalted. Hestia turned to look around and saw Lily who had an empty glass in her hand. Lily. Well, now that you woke up what the hell happened? Another 30 minutes had passed, just enough time for Welf, Hestia, and Mikoto to recover from their defeat and humiliation. Lily sighed and rubbed her temple. Apparently they had given the rabbit a fauna which became upset upon feeling Hestia's divine power. Upon obtaining its fauna the rabbit was still upset and began to jump everywhere. Now that it had a fauna, it was much stronger and faster than a normal rabbit. So he caused some damage and hit Hestia in the face, knocking her out. Welf carried Bell so that Yuki wouldn't hit him, but Bell seemed to get angry and slapped him without controlling his strength. Welf never expected that blow and not being prepared at all he received it full on. Welf let go of Bell and slipped falling onto the sofa, but his neck hit the wooden edges and he fell onto the sofa unconscious. Before Bell fell to the ground he was caught by Mikoto who tried to calm Yuki and Bell, but received a kick from both of them right in the chest that sent her flying towards the window. And that's how a deity and 2 level 2 adventurers were defeated by a rabbit and a baby. Humiliating, isn't it? Lily. We can't go on like this, we must get more help, thoughtful. Harahim. But worried. Lily. We're running out of money, we have to go to the dungeon soon or we'll run out of Valis, and to go to the dungeon and have a good reward, we'll need at least 3 of us, it would be. Harahim. Hestia-sama and I can take care of him. Looking at Lily with excitement. Lily. No, if with 3 of you were able to knock them out with only 2 it will be worse, we will need someone of a higher level to help us, how about the fertility host elf? Looking at Hestia. Hestia. I highly doubt my mother would let that elf go away for a while to take care of a baby. In any case, she might allow us to do so, but in exchange for a lot of money that we don't have. Everyone sighed thinking about someone who could help them, who was trustworthy and of equal or higher level than Bell. We will be more than willing to help you with Bell's care, should you need at higher levels. Hestia sighed, then looked at Harahim and opened her eyes as a magic stone lamp lit up above her head. Hestia. I know who we can ask for help, smiling, we will ask the Loki family, they can take care of Bell. Protests immediately sounded. Welf. Is he sure? Lily. You must be joking, right? Getting up abruptly. Mikoto. I don't think it's a good idea. Harahim. We can't do that. Everyone fell silent and looked at Harahim in surprise. They had never seen her react so excitedly. Harahim realized her scream and sat back down, embarrassed, she didn't know what had happened to her, she had reacted on instinct. Hestia. Don't worry, like Lily said before, they only need 3 in the dungeon so, looking at Harahim. Harahim. Huh. Twilight Mansion entrance. Hestia and Harahim were standing in front of the great Twilight Mansion, headquarters and home of the Loki family. Harahim had baby Bell in her arms and Yuki who was now Bell's pet. Hestia swallowed hard and turned her gaze observing a catgirl with black hair and eyes wearing standard adventurer clothes and a sword at her waist. The catgirl watched them in silence, she was the guard at the entrance and surprisingly had allowed them access, saying that it was a request from her vice captain. Hestia was brought out of her thoughts when she heard the door open. She and Harahim turned their gaze and looked at Riveria who had opened the door. Riveria I see you're already here, smiling, tell me what do you need? Innocent. Hestia growled as she watched Riveria play dumb, she knew perfectly well why they were here, she had already been waiting for them. Hestia. We need help, it would be, Bell he maintains his status as level 3, he doesn't know how to control his strength, we need help, lowering his head, please. Riveria smiled pleased. Riveria. It will be a pleasure to help you. Hestia. But. Smiling triumphantly, I have 3 requests. Riveria stopped smiling and put on a serious face upon hearing Hestia's words. She wanted Aiz to take care of Bell, so she had no choice but to accept. Hestia. First of all, we don't have much of a budget since Bell was our main source of income, so we don't have many materials to take care of babies. Riveria quickly understood what Hestia was getting at and nodded, she could easily pay for all the baby care materials for Bell. Seeing Riveria nod in agreement with her, Hestia continued with her conditions. Hestia. In second, Yuki stays. Carrying the rabbit. Yuki Kai. Tilts his head. Riveria. A rabbit. Raising an eyebrow, why? Hestia. She is Bell Kun's pet, smiling, her name is Yuki, she helps calm Bell when he gets upset or plays with him, giving Yuki to Riveria. Riveria. Looking at Yuki, a rabbit, ha curious, looking at Bell, and your last condition. Raising an eyebrow. Hestia. She'll stay. Pointing at Harahim. Riveria a. Twilight Mansion Library. The atmosphere was tense. Or at least between Riveria and Harahim. Well, a certain golden-haired girl was sitting on the floor with a slight smile on her face while shaking a rattle with a small baby Bell, who was sitting between her legs clapping happily. Bell was happy, finally after a long time he could see Aiz, he didn't know the reason, but he loved being with her presence alone made him happy. Bell looked at Aiz, specifically her small smile, her eyes sparkled and she smiled happily at spending time together with Aiz. Leaving the animated Bell and Aiz. Harahim and Riveria were sitting at a table with their eyes on the floor, the atmosphere was tense and silent. On Harahim's lap was Yuki sleeping peacefully, completely ignoring the tension that Riveria and Harahim were creating. Harahim stopped looking at Riveria and turned to look at Aiz with a feeling of insecurity, she didn't trust at all that she could take good care of Bell, but she was level 6, if Bell were to hit her, he would hardly be able to harm her. The same with Riveria, despite being a mage she was level 6 and a veteran, a blow from Bell wouldn't do much damage to her, not to mention that it was unlikely that Bell would take them by surprise. Harahim sighed resignedly, at least she was there to take care of Bell in case something happened that they couldn't handle. Riveria was also deep in thought. She was worried about Aiz, she wanted Aiz to see Bell as her son, and vice versa, she would really like Aiz to learn the feeling of motherhood, maybe that way she could slowly forget her revenge, even if this didn't last long, the experience would serve Aiz for the future, and maybe it would even encourage her to one day start a family and put aside her obsession with being stronger. The problem was that Bell saw Harahim as a mother. She could easily notice it, Bell looked at Aiz with admiration, he almost seemed to see her as a mother, but it wasn't like that, she could easily see the shine in Bell's eyes, every time she looked at Aiz or Harahim, the shine was different, one was of longing for Aiz, and the other of affection for Harahim. Although it was already problematic that Bell saw Harahim as a mother, things became more complicated because Harahim had a great affection for Bell. She probably doesn't realize it, but Riveria knew that Harahim was beginning to see Bell as her son. Which lowered the chances of Bell seeing Aiz as a mother. Riveria sighed mentally thinking of a way to solve this. Harahim and Riveria came out of their thoughts and turned to look at Aiz who had approached them carrying baby Bell. Aiz. Her belly makes a strange noise, she's hungry, looking at Riveria. Riveria smiled in relief that Aiz had appeared to break the tense atmosphere and stood up from her chair. Riveria. Yesterday we spent all day studying so we didn't have much time to go buy things for Bell, but we can go right now with Ermid to buy them, according to what I know in their headquarters, they don't only sell potions and healing things, they also sell good quality baby things, thoughtful. Aiz nodded in confirmation imagining herself feeding Bell porridge in his mouth. Aiz smiled slightly as she imagined that scene and looked excitedly at Riveria. Riveria smiled at Aiz, she wasn't very expressive, but usually her eyes always showed what she felt, now Aiz had an expressionless face, but she could easily see the enthusiasm in her eyes. Bell, who was in Aiz's arms, looked at Harahim and extended his little hands towards her. Bell bah. Mirando Harahim. Bell's stomach growled again, indicating that he was hungry. Harahim opened her eyes and smiled thinking of a way to take her baby away from Aiz. Harahim stood completely still for a second before being surprised by her thoughts, she had called Bell her baby, she had done it unconsciously. Harahim shook her head in shame, looked back at Bell, and her gaze became determined, she had decided to take care of him at all costs, and that would do. Riveria. I'll pay for everything, looking at Aiz. Aiz. No, shaking his head, I want to pay for everything from Bell, I can do it, I don't really use my money unless it's for the maintenance of my sword, so I have a lot of valis saved, looking at Riveria. Riveria smiled and nodded calmly accepting Ai's decision, but before she could say anything else Aiz became excited when she felt Bell suddenly being snatched from her arms. Aiz suddenly turned her gaze and stared at Harahim who had a calm smile on her face while carrying Bell. Aiz frowned and looked at Harahim with clear anger, she was about to complain, but Harahim spoke first. Harahim. Are you hungry? Smiling. Bell looked at Harahim with discomfort as his stomach growled again, showing that he was hungry. Riveria. It would be best to go buy baby food for him, looking at Harahim. Bell lightly pulled Harahim's kimono who quickly understood what he wanted. Harahim. It won't be necessary. Riveria behind huh? Harahim. Wants milk, looking at them. Riveria. We don't have baby milk either, confused. Harahim. It doesn't matter, I can breastfeed him, smiling. Riveria and Aiz were left blank upon hearing Harahim's response. Had they heard correctly? Breastfeeding? That was impossible. Harahim shouldn't be able to breastfeed unless she was breastfeeding. Aiz was about to tell Harahim that it was silly to breastfeed him because he wasn't really her son and she shouldn't breastfeed. But before doing so Riveria stopped her. Riveria. Are you breastfeeding, Harahim-san? Looking at her. Harahim nodded quickly and looked away. Harahim. One night Bell was very hungry, I tried to give him porridge, but he didn't want to eat it, after a while I discovered that what he wanted was milk, I couldn't give it to him since he wasn't breastfeeding, but Bell was starting to throw tantrums, and I couldn't think of any other way to calm him down than breastfeeding him, I discovered that somehow he was breastfeeding, and I was able to breastfeed him without any problems, blushing. Riveria nodded thoughtfully, at first she was surprised by the fact that Harahim admitted to being breastfeeding, but after thinking about it a bit, it wasn't too strange for this to happen, mainly because Harahim was a beast man, according to Riveria, she knew that beast men were capable of breastfeeding even without having children, as long as they have a baby to take care of and have the strong desire to take care of them or protect them, in fact. This could also happen with humans and all kinds of demi-humans, but it was more common in beast men. Aiz continued processing the information, according to what she read it shouldn't be possible for Harahim to breastfeed if she hadn't given birth to Bell, but seeing Riveria nod, she had no choice but to reluctantly accept it. Riveria. There's a bathroom here in the library, it's in the left corner, you can go breastfeed him there, when you're done we'll go with Ermid to buy the rest, closing her eyes. Harahim nodded happily and quietly went to a more private place to breastfeed Bell. Seeing that Harahim left, Aiz spoke. Aiz. Is it true? Riveria. It's possible, nodding. Aiz remained silent, thoughtful, suddenly above her head a light turned on and it began to fail before breaking. Aiz had an idea. But before Aiz could plan how to do it, he received a small blow to the head. Riveria. Don't even think about it, expressionless. Aiz lowered her shoulders in defeat and looked at Riveria blankly. Riveria. To start with, it's unlikely that the same thing that happened to Harahim will happen to you. Secondly, Bell doesn't need two different women to breastfeed him, it could hurt him, it would. Aiz mentally sighed and threw his plan into a mental trash can. Let's not give up. Let's make sure Bell loves us more. Aiz looked to her left at a little 6-year-old Aiz, or as she called her, Mini Aiz. Aiz nodded determinedly at her mini-me's words, she would do everything possible to make Bell become more attached to her than to Harahim. A few minutes had passed, and finally Harahim returned carrying Bell who already seemed calmer after eating. Bell extending his arms upwards. Harahim. Let's go with Ermid-san, smiling. Aiz looked at Bell who, upon seeing her, extended his hands towards her wanting them to play. Aiz quickly approached Harahim who was distracted thinking about what they would need for baby Bell. Harahim blinked in puzzlement before becoming excited and looking at Aiz who was holding baby Bell who clapped happily and surprised by Aiz's rapid movement. Mini Aiz. Baby bunny achieved. Raising arms triumphantly. Aiz smiled victoriously and looked at baby Bell. Aiz Curiosa. Aiz looked at Bell's right hand where there were some strands of golden hair. Bell pulled Aiz's hair with his hand, but nothing happened, Aiz just watched him in silence. Aiz. Also. Ladindo Lakabiza. Bell stopped smiling when he heard Aiz's moan and quickly began to cry. He thought he had heard her. Aiz and Harahim were excited to see Bell cry and without realizing it, they teamed up to calm him down. Aiz Bell, look, shaking a rattle. Harahim. Do you want to play with Yuki? Smiling motherly. It didn't work and Bell kept crying. While Harahim and Aiz tried to calm him down, they were seen by Riveria, who was still sitting in front of the table while drinking a cup of tea. Riveria. That won't do any good, standing up. Aiz and Harahim stepped aside, watching Riveria, who stood in front of Aiz, looking at baby Bell, who was crying in her arms. Riveria. Yeah, rubbing her head, you didn't hurt anyone, little one, everything's okay, smiling. Bell slowly stopped crying and looked at Riveria, who was giving him a motherly smile. Bell stops crying, ha. Extends his hands towards Riveria. Riveria. Do you want me to carry you? No problem, smiling. Riveria took Bell from Aiz's arms, who was shocked, just like Harahim, when she saw Riveria calmly leave the library, carrying baby Bell in her arms, who seemed to look at her long ears in amazement. Riveria. Are you coming or not? Turning to look at them. Aiz and Harahim came out of their thoughts and quickly went towards Riveria's direction, who was heading to Ermid's pharmacy to buy all the baby products that Bell needed for now. Elsewhere. House of the god Maich. In the home of the god Maich was the aforementioned looking with sweated Hestia and Lily, who were in front of him. Hestia. How long will it take you to create a potion that reverses Bell's effect, would it be? Maich. And I'm not sure, it's Tuesday, right? Come on Sunday, there I'll have progress and maybe a potion that will return Bell to normal. Lily. Until Sunday. Excited. Maich. There are side effects if you take more than one potion in a 1-week period. The potions were only prototypes, so they have a lot of bugs to fix, sorry. Hestia. It doesn't matter, you keep working, it's better late than never, I guess it would be. Maich nodded and got to work, hoping to return Bell to normal. Little did he know that Bell would undergo many more changes thanks to the potions. End. First arc-age swap problems with a little rabbit, 04. Diansech Family Pharmacy. Everyone had already arrived at the Diansech Family Pharmacy, where the famous Ermid Tiesener was, the best doctor and healer of Aurario, as well as one of the best creators of objects and magic items. The door of the pharmacy opened, revealing Harahim, Riveria and Aiz, who had Bell in her arms after asking Riveria hundreds of times for Bell to calm down. Ermid looked at the door as she saw it open and raised an eyebrow at the scene. Ermid. Riviera-san, Aiz-san, what do you need? Raising an eyebrow, may I ask your name? Looking at Harahim. Harahim. Why yes, I'm Harahim Sanjauno, nice to meet you, smiling shyly. Ermid nodded and looked at them all calmly before looking at Bell. Ermid. A baby? Raising an eyebrow. Ermid looked at Harahim, who seemed to be talking to Bell with a beautiful motherly smile, although it was obvious that she didn't understand her. Ermid. Is it your baby? Looking at Harahim. All? Huh. Surprised. Ermid. I doubt it's the Sword Princess's baby, she comes often for potions, and the baby is at least 7 months old, it's impossible that she had a baby without her noticing, it can't be Riveria Sama's, because it would have pointy ears and be a half-elf, but, looking at Harahim, the children of humans and beastmen have the possibility of being normal humans or beastmen, and I don't know you or have ever seen you, so it's more likely that it's your child, looking at her. Harahim. Well, blushing. Riveria. Ermid, looking at her. Ermid. Sorry, I got distracted. What do you need? Looking at them. Riveria. Let's say she and her baby move to the Twilight Mansion, we need the materials to take care of him, looking at her. Ermid. I see. Ermid came out from behind the shelf where she was serving and looked at the girls. Ermid. Follow me, calmly. Ermid walked towards the baby section, followed by the others. Ermid. This is where everything is, looking at them. Harahim, Riveria and Aiz looked at the area with curiosity, it was quite large, and there were many things for babies, diapers, bottles, pacifiers, onices, small clothes, powdered milk, porridge, etc. Ermid. You can choose whatever you want, looking at them calmly. Harahim approached the onices and looked at a white one with a hat that had bunny ears. Harahim smiled and took it under Bell's gaze, who looked at the jumpsuit curiously. Eld. Tilts head. Harahim. Yes, it's for you, smiling. Bell didn't understand Harahim, but he smiled at her smile and raised his arms happily. Harahim continued looking at some onices before going to where some jars with porridge and powdered milk were. Harahim. I don't think it's necessary to buy this, my mom already offered to make the porridge and you liked it a lot, but, looking at the powdered milk. I wouldn't recommend it. Harahim. Turning her gaze. Harahim looked at Ermid, who was right behind her. Ermid. I wouldn't recommend giving powdered milk, looking at her. Harahim. Why? Curious. Ermid. Powdered milk is not bad, but breast milk is always better, it has all the nutrients a baby needs, and you can give it to him whenever you want, as far as I can see, your baby is still 6 to 7 months old, so it's a better option to continue giving him breast milk for now, looking at her. Harahim. I see, thanks, smiling. Ermid nodded calmly and looked at Harahim. Ermid. You're too young to be a mother. Don't you have any problems taking care of your baby? Curious. Harahim looked at Bell, who looked back at her and smiled. Harahim. No, I don't have any, smiling maternally. Ermid nodded with a slight smile and continued talking to Harahim while they looked at the baby things. On the other side. Aiz and Riveria were walking through the aisles of the baby section taking everything that Bell would need. Riveria. Ready, we have everything, taking some diapers. Aiz nodded and looked into the distance at Harahim and Ermid, who seemed to be playing with baby Bell. Aiz made a small pout and looked at Riveria, who shrugged. Riveria. Don't look at me like it's my fault, now let's pay, calm down. Aiz nodded and went with Harahim to pay for what she had taken as well. Riveria. Harahim-san, looking at her. Harahim hi. Smiling. Riveria. Let's pay, take what you wanted, Bell. Looking at her. Harahim. Yes. Smiling. Harahim had a few things in her hands that Ermid had recommended to her, but mostly she had the bunny Odyssey she had taken at the beginning. Riveria oh? Aiz? Both Aiz and Riveria's eyes lit up when they saw the bunny Odyssey, it would definitely look good on Bell. Come back soon. Ermid said goodbye to the girls who waved goodbye and went to the Twilight Mansion to put everything in order. Harahim was pouting, right. Well. Aiz had snatched Bell from her with the excuse that she paid for everything, so she had more than the right to charge him. Harahim couldn't even complain. What would she do against a level 6? Besides, technically she was right. Aiz had been the one who paid for everything, so she had no right to complain. Although that didn't stop him from glaring at her the whole way. Riveria. Cough cough, getting attention, where will we get the porridge? You said there was someone who always bought it and Bell liked it a lot. Looking at Harahim. Harahim. Looking at her, oh, right, let's go to the fertility hostess, my mom is the one who makes the porridge. Riveria stood there motionless upon hearing Harahim's words. Harahim and Aiz continued walking towards the hostess before stopping and turning back to see Riveria, who was standing there still. Harahim. Riveria-sama. Raising an eyebrow. Aiz. Looking at Riveria, curious. Riveria. Motionless, let's go back with Ermid, turning around. Aiz. Harahim. Blinking. Before Riveria went back to Ermid's pharmacy, Harahim and Aiz quickly went to stop her. Harahim. Wait, Riveria-sama. Taking her hand. Riveria. No, shaking her head, I'm more than sure that Mia will want to charge us 5 times what it would have cost with Ermid, let's go back and buy the porridge there, expressive. Before continuing walking, Harahim stood in front of him, defending the. Harahim. Please wait, breathing heavily, Sir-san and Ryu-san managed to get Mama to reduce her price to a much more moderate one, since Belle loves her porridge, please, pleading. Riveria stopped and looked into Harahim's eyes, who clasped her hands in supplication. Riveria. Sighing heavily, walking. Harahim smiled and quickly went to the fertility host with Aiz, followed by Riveria, who sighed. Riveria. I have a feeling it's going to be a long day. Hostess of fertility. In the hostess of fertility, Riveria could be seen sitting at a table quietly drinking tea. On the other side of the bar were all the waitresses as well as Harahim and Aiz pampering Bell. Sir. Hello Bell-kun, smiling, I'm Sir, you remember me right? Smiling affectionately. Bell-bay tilts his head. Ryu. Cranel-san, looking at him. Chibi. Ryu looked at Bell in silence before slowly leaving, she didn't trust herself to control herself and she was afraid that in the end she would end up hugging Bell because of how tender he looked. Anya. White-haired kun Naya, smiling, how cute you are, like an adorable baby bunny Naya, smiling. Anya's tail slowly swished from side to side, reflecting her excitement at seeing Bell. Linnery. A very pretty one, smiling. Harahim. Bell, do you want me to carry you? Spreading her arms smiling. Aiz. Bell come, extending her arms with a calm smile. Bell looking at them. Bell looked at both of them undecided, a drop of sweat falling from his forehead, as if he knew that the decision he was about to make was of great importance. The other girls were all around him staring at him waiting for him to do something. Bell began to shrink back in fear, not knowing what to do or who to choose. Aiz. Come on Bell, bound come, smiling slightly. Harahim. Wanna play? Come on, I'll always be there for you when you need me, smiling. Bell looked at Harahim and then at Aiz with uncertainty, he extended his hand towards Harahim, but seeing Aiz's face become depressed, he moved his hand away and then extended it towards her, but Harahim's face also became depressed and Bell again withdrew his hand without knowing what to do. It didn't help that he was feeling the pressure of the stares of everyone who seemed to see his every move. Bell uncomfortable. Bell didn't know what to do and begged for help from whoever it was to get him out of the situation. That's enough. Like a ray of hope, his pleas were heard and fate itself for his luck sent him help and that help had the name of Riveria. Riveria. That's enough. Don't you see that they're suffocating him? It would be. Riveria approached the girls who stepped back, intimidated by her serious and intimidating appearance. Bell raised his arms and Riveria carefully picked him up, giving him a motherly look. Riveria. Yeah, you don't have to choose, smiling, come on, let's wait for my mom to give us your food and we'll come back, smiling. Bell looked at Riveria with a sparkle in his eyes and nodded, not understanding her words, but knowing that he could trust her. Riveria went to feel again, ignoring the girls who were still there looking at her in silence, without knowing whether to confront her or not. Okay, here it is. They all turned their gaze toward the kitchen door, where my mother came out carrying a small bag full of well-sealed jars of baby food for a few days. Harahim. Thank you, my mom, taking the bag. My mom. Yes, go before I charge you the same price as before, returning to the kitchen. Harahim and Aiz said goodbye to the hostess girls and went to Riveria to tell her that they had to go. Of course, they didn't expect to see her sitting next to Ryu, who had Bell sitting between his legs while caressing his cheek. Bell bah. Smiling. Ryu smiled slightly at Bell with affection. If she was honest, she had always liked children since she joined the Hestia family until now. They were so pure and innocent that it was impossible not to smile at them, especially at the little baby she had on her lap. The bunny-like baby with a beautiful smile that would melt anyone's heart. Riveria smiled watching Bell and Ryu's interaction. It was noticeable how everyone who knew Bell was noticeably concerned about him. Even the host's elf, who always had a serious expression, was here playing with him while smiling. She had never seen her smile, and that was despite the fact that they often came to the host's house because of Loki. Riveria. Ryu became excited and turned his gaze, just like Riveria, to see Harahim and Aiz, who were staring blankly at Ryu. Ryu blushed in embarrassment and quickly stood up carrying Bell. Ryu Toma. Ryu gave Harahim a bell and then turned to look at Riveria. Ryu. Thank you Riveria-sama, bowing, it was a pleasure, see you, saying goodbye. After an awkward moment for Ryu, Harahim, Aiz, and Riveria left the fertility hostess for the Twilight Mansion, where another problem would soon arise. Twilight Mansion entrance. Riveria, Aiz, Harahim and baby Bell were already returning to the Twilight Mansion with everything they had bought, which would last a few days, 4 at least. Riveria. Well, there are several rooms available in the Twilight Mansion, so Harahim can sleep in one of them, don't worry. Harahim. Yes, thank you, I'll take Bell with me, smiling. Riveria. Oh, no need, smiling calmly, Aiz can take care of him in her room, looking at Aiz. Aiz nodded determinedly, having baby Bell in her arms sleeping would undoubtedly make her happy. Of course Harahim thought totally differently. Harahim. And she can't do that, she's never taken care of a baby, she doesn't know what it needs and, exalted. Riveria. Don't worry Harahim-san, I'll be with her to make sure everything is under control, calm. Aiz looked at Riveria in surprise, she didn't expect that, but she preferred Riveria to be there helping and advising her than Harahim having Bell forbidding her to take care of him. Harahim. But, nervous. Aiz was about to speak, but was interrupted when the door was violently opened, revealing a werewolf with grey fur and amber eyes. Growling. Riveria was going to open the door first, so she was in front of Bet looking into his eyes calmly, the complete opposite of Bet who seemed furious while sniffing the air. Bet. This smell sniff, I recognize it, sharpening her gaze, it's similar to that bastard tomato sniff, but it also sounds like a baby's, looking around, hey old witch, get out of the way. Bet's pupils widened like a predator impatient for its prey. Aiz took a few steps back and hugged Bell tightly to protect him from anything that might happen. While Riveria also sharpened her gaze and stood firm, making it clear to Bet that she would not move from there. But Bet wasn't a level 5 adventurer for nothing. At a speed worthy of a level 5, Bet passed by Riveria while pushing her slightly. Riveria grabbed her staff tightly and tried to hit him on the head. Unfortunately, Bet was not a specialist in dexterity and resistance for nothing, and she being a mage, would not damage him much physically. So Bet was able to push her aside easily, blocking her attack and looking at Aiz a few meters in front of him carrying in his arms a small baby with white hair and red eyes. Bet opened his eyes in disbelief, immediately his pupils dilated like those of a predator and fixed on Bell as a prey. Bet was excited, so when he saw Bell he couldn't control himself and saw him alone and nothing more as a prey that he had to attack. Bet grah. Bet launched himself to attack him by instinct without even thinking about it, a bit like a beast. Aiz turned her back and covered Bell with her body, ready to receive the attack for him. She could easily counterattack, but if she tried with Bell in her arms, she would get hurt and that was the last thing she wanted. So she turned her back on Bet, willing to do whatever it took to protect Bell. She had changed from a strength-obsessed swordswoman to someone who wanted to protect her family. Fortunately, Aiz wasn't the only one who changed thanks to baby Bell. Harahim. Enough. Angry. Just inches away from her, Bet's fist stopped. Harahim had stood in front of Bet without hesitation to stop his attack on Bell. Bet breathed heavily with his eyes open, his tail twitching, implying that he was still excited. Bet looked at Harahim fiercely in the eyes, she looked like a wild wolf wanting to hunt. And despite the threatening gaze of that fearsome werewolf, Harahim did not retreat a step, she stood firm without losing eye contact with Bet, without showing fear or doubt in her actions. Harahim's gaze was also fierce, her eyes reflected anger, and seemed to be warning Bet that if he took one more step he would regret it. It was like a mother protecting her baby from a predator that wanted to eat it. Bet and Harahim continued looking at each other for a few more seconds, just like a wolf, Bet was growling, wanting to give a threatening and intimidating image. Of course that image of a ferocious wolf slowly decayed as his tail, ears and head were lowering, making it clear that Bet was giving up. Despite the notable difference in height, Bet was leaning at Harahim's chin level, his gaze downwards in surrender. Bet could still clearly feel Harahim's threatening gaze on him. His growling stopped and he went silent with his ears down. If you looked at him from another angle, he now looked like a scolded dog. However, his ears suddenly perked up as he heard an object approaching at high speed towards him. Bet suddenly turned his head to see the object and looked in shock at a staff and a blue sword sheath inches from his face. Pam. Bet received the double attack without even being able to react. The thunder of the blow was heard everywhere, causing a loud and sharp sound that disoriented Bet's sharp senses, which soon fell unconscious. As Harahim fell to the ground, she breathed heavily and in relief. She looked up and saw Riveria and Aiz, who were just like her, watching Bet's motionless body. Baby Bell was still in Aiz's arms, trembling and with teary eyes. He could easily feel Bet's killing intent when he looked at him, and he got scared too much. Aiz snorted at Bet and put her sword and sheath back on her waist. Riveria sighed when she saw that the situation had calmed down and looked at the sky, wondering if this was some kind of pointless test or if they were simply experiencing Bell's famous bad luck. Rip. Riveria came out of her thoughts and looked at the sky, realizing that it was cloudy and a drop of water had fallen on her cheek, indicating that it was about to rain. Riveria. It's about to rain, we'd better go inside. Looking at them. Harahim nodded and walked to Aiz's side, who was rubbing Bell's cheek to calm him down. Aiz. Calm down, everything is okay now, hugging him. Bell stopped shaking and looked at Aiz with teary eyes. Not only did he maintain his level 3, but also his adventurous instinct, and above all his unusual ability, gaze in the back of the head, is not an ability given by his fauna, it is a natural ability that he developed mentally when he felt that someone was always watching him from the Tower of Babel, an ability that made him unusually sensitive to looks and the feeling behind them. Aiz did her best to calm him down, but it was useless. Bell didn't seem any less scared than before. At least until Harahim stood next to Aiz and began to affectionately nuzzle her head. Harahim. Everything is fine, smiling. Surprisingly, Bell began to calm down. She still had a slightly furrowed brow and some small tears, but she already looked much better. Behind. Tom. Harahim watched in puzzlement as Aiz carefully extended it to Bell, thinking she was the best option to calm him down. Harahim did not refuse and carried Bell with great care. Aiz looked at her silently and decided to enter the Twilight Mansion. Bell. Waving his arms nervously. Harahim. Bell. Worried. Aiz stopped and quickly returned worried. Bell continued like this for a few seconds before looking at Aiz and calming down. Bell pouting. Riveria watched the scene silently, easily figuring out what was happening. Riveria. He became fond of both of them, looking at them, and wants both of them to take care of him, smiling. Riveria approached to see baby Bell, who, upon seeing her, stopped pouting and extended his hands towards her. Riveria. Curious. Aiz and Harahim looked at Rivera with narrowed eyes. He hadn't grown fond of them too, he had done so with all three. Riveria. Don't look at me like that, and I'm Droplet, whatever, let's go in, don't forget that we're still outside. Aiz and Harahim nodded and entered the Twilight Mansion together. Now that they knew Bell didn't want to leave any of them, they couldn't fight over who would take care of him and who wouldn't. They would all have to do it. Both of them walked through the halls of the Twilight Mansion, thankful that there was no one there. It would be difficult to explain what an unknown girl with a baby was doing here. Riveria suddenly stopped, confusing Aiz and Harahim. Aiz. What's going on, Riveria? Looking at her. Riveria. I feel like we forgot something, thoughtful. Harahim. If it's because of Bet, don't worry, we left him here to get wet, don't worry. Riveria. No, it's something else, thoughtful. Riveria thought for a few seconds before looking at one of the bags where they brought the things they bought at the Airmid Infirmary. Inside the bag was a white jumpsuit with a cap and bunny ears. Riveria opened her eyes and remembered something. Riveria. Yuki. Harahim also opened her eyes and looked at Riveria. Harahim. We left her here. Riveria. In the library. Riveria's expression changed to one of total terror, a rabbit with a fauna in her precious library, anything could happen, the image of the place in disaster, and broken books everywhere altered her. Riveria. Quick. Running. Riveria ran upset towards the library being followed closely by Aiz and Harahim. Upon arriving at the library she expected to see a mess and broken books everywhere, surprisingly the place was completely fine and in order. Riveria sighed in relief, if something happened to her bookstore hell would burn on earth, and no one wanted to see a furious Riveria, really no one. Harahim. Where is it? Looking around. How beautiful. Aiz. Whispers. Curious. Bell ticking his head. You look a lot like Argonaut Chiquito. Well, all rabbits look like Argonaut Chiquito, even the Umbridge look like him, especially the ones that use a knife, although those are rare just like him. Riveria Tiona. Raising an eyebrow. Riveria turned around a corner and saw Tiona sitting on the floor while reading a blue cover book, on her lap was Yuki who was receiving Tiona's caresses. Tiona turning around, oh. Mama-sama, smiling. Riveria had a vein in her forehead and looked at Tiona dangerously. Riveria. Stop telling me, Mom, sighing, what are you doing here? Raising an eyebrow. Tiona. Well, I wanted to look for some hero books to read and I found this little one. Pointing at Yuki. One of Yuki's ears perked up and she raised her head quickly looking at Riveria. Yuki Caillou. Tilts his head. Riveria. It looks like Bell. Does Bell look like Yuki? Confused. Tiona. I found it interesting why she jumps and runs very high, much higher than she should, so I stayed here reading and taking care of her, smiling. Riveria. Well, I guess I should thank you for taking care of the library, sighing. Tiona. You're welcome. Smiling, looking at Aiz and Harahim. Tiona. Oh, hello, smiling, Looking at Bell, Argonaut little one. Stopped suddenly. Yuki got excited and jumped off Tiona's lap at the same time she stood up. In a second, Tiona approached Harahim, who was holding Bell, to whom she gave a radiant smile. Tiona. Ah. You're as cute as a baby. Rubbing her cheeks. Bell started laughing at Tiona's lively attitude, he seemed to like her. Of course Aiz and Harahim had a vein in their heads when they saw their interaction. Tiona. Oh man, looking at the window, is it already so late? Yeah, the book was long, but it was entertaining, smiling, well, I'll go to my room to sleep before Tiona comes looking for me, unless he's spying on the captain sleeping, which is more normal than you think. Well, bye. Leaving. Tiona left the place leaving the three and baby Bell, who immediately turned her gaze to Yuki who stood on two legs to look at him. Bell extending his arms towards Yuki. Riveria sighed and carried Yuki to put her in front of Bell, who quickly rubbed her ears as if to say. Well done. Yuki raised her head and began to purr happily, of course I don't know, I hope that suddenly a bigger hand will also start rubbing her head. Yuki turning his head. Riveria. Well done, you didn't destroy anything, smiling in relief. Yuki tilted her head and stayed still, accepting Riveria's caresses. Aiz's room. In Aiz's room were Harahim, Riveria and Aiz who was lying in her bed with normal blue pajamas, lying carefully next to her was Bell in a rabbit odyssey next to him was Yuki, sleeping peacefully preventing Bell from turning over by being stuck to him. On the floor lying on some sheets and some separate pillows were Riveria and Harahim in silence. Bell looking at Aiz. Aiz looked at Bell and smiled slightly before hugging him gently and closing her eyes to sleep, it had been a long day. Harahim and Riveria also closed their eyes to sleep, the light was already off, so they just covered themselves with the sheets. Bell. Worried. Give it to me. Maybe he's hungry. Don't be silly, he just doesn't like the dark. Caillou. And. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching, if you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day, bye.